time. I be the man that lasts in the suckers. I be the man that run the suckers. You know you cocksuckers. I'm the man that's drinking vanilla. Crown Royal feeling real smooth. Dude, attitudes be changing left and right. I ain't talking about nothing coming off the top of the brain. I'm feeling like insane podcast. Unpredictable like mystical. We doing that thing. We bang. Easy breezy. Back in Hawaii. Loving what I gotta do to make it you like me. Steve, huh? Alexandria. I don't wanna mess with anybody. Look, I'm the man in the game.
But once you get brainwashed into the organization, you already know they tell you, ain't nothing, back on the block, forget that, X, Y, Z. So that's what I thought for the longest. Like, you know, none of my friends not doing anything. And it's not that they're not doing anything. They just haven't found their path yet. And joining the military, you're forced on the path, essentially, because you take a test for the ASVAB,
right.
And from there, they pick your job. It's not like, oh, you know, I want to be the meteorologist, or whatever you call that, whatever that MOS is, the weather MOS, or whatnot. Like, you really have a true passion of it. However, we're stuck in this, like, World War II state of mind, as far as the ASVAB. To where it's like it's not about your passion, is what you line up to do. Everybody's not a good test taker.
Absolutely. And there's so many different ways to measure intelligence, and really the way that we measure intelligence is to fit this one box, like the corporate America box, so to speak, right? Which definitely leaves out so much creativity that the human being is capable of. So I definitely hear you on that, man. And I love how you mentioned, it sounded like you mentioned kind of the propaganda, right? Like of these, it's re-socialization, right? When they take us out of our community, away from our families, right? They isolate us, they put us on those yellow footprints, right? And then we're plugged in to this new like system, right? That we've learned, right? And we've learned to trust this based on like tradition, you know, my cousin and grandfather, right? We have all these sort of origin stories, but you're hitting on something, man, because it's powerful. The Marine Corps is a cult.
It is. Let's go into it. Hold on. I'm about to start it up. Yo, welcome to another episode of Unpredictable Thoughts Podcast. Your boy Trouble's in the building, doing the damn thing, ain't doing anything at all. Thank y'all all for supporting the last podcast with Bria. Nonprofit. Make sure y'all check that out. Make sure you go to her website, glowwithpurpose.com. And then also you could get all the Keep That Same Energy merchandise on unpredictablethoughts2.com as well. So today I got a very, very special guest, a fellow brethren, Ryan Miller in the building. Met him on Clubhouse. Being in different rooms, and of course, Clubhouse, as we know, has a lot of expertise in Clubhouse and subject matter experts. However, following Ryan for probably like 4 months, he's in room after room after room, and he's just speaking knowledge. So I'm like, look, he really do this. It's not, one of those things. I joined the military and I did Firewatch and, I'm a subject matter expert. Like, no, he did his thing. So, we're going to talk a lot. We're going to go deep into this as far as the veterans community, because Ryan just doesn't, he's for the causes. He's for the causes. The 22 veterans commit suicide. He doing marches. He trying to get, veterans and cannabis. He's trying to have that aligned. And I think like psychedelics, is that psychedelics as well. So this is going to be a very deep spiritual, I don't want to call it hippie. That's not the word for it, but this be a good podcast. And we're going to debunk a stigma that I really didn't know until actually being in the room with him. So, we got Ryan.
Yo, thank you so much for the really warm and generous introduction, Christopher. And I met you on Clubhouse. I think I met you the first day I joined. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, and it has been a hell of a 4 months. Super impressed with the platform. There's also a shadow side, like a dark side of it that we could talk about too, I think, just in terms of, the time and attention that it can consume and how it kind of exacerbates this, the social media sort of world that we're in, right? And that fear of missing out and things like that. But that's a whole digression. And yeah, thank you again for the kind words. And really, man, I just want to like really invite like Creator and Cosmos and right our ancestors to just speak through me, right? So I don't need any credit. I am nobody. I am you.
Oh,
You are me. We are one type shit. So I love you. Thank you for having me. I look forward to chatting with you, man.
yeah, we gonna turn this up. Normally with my vets, I normally do a whole podcast about why you join, why you get out, and like tell me about your things. So in a snippet, can you give me on why did you join?
Totally.
And then why did you get out? And then we're gonna go deeper into those aspects.
Totally, man. I'll try to give it just as a snippet. My grandfather spent 30 years in the Marines, Sergeant Major, retired, right?
Wow.
Chosin Reservoir, met Chesty Puller, like all that, right? And then my cousin, my older cousin, 10 years older, he just retired a couple years ago after over 30 years. So these were like the patriarchs of the family, right? Like my cousin's like my generation, and he's like the shining star of the family, right? So you
Yeah.
have the traditions and you have these like kind of social and familiar forces, I think, that influence us to enlist. And I'm curious about that. But then ultimately, it was like March of my senior year in high school. I didn't take the SATs. I didn't apply to any colleges. Some of my other friends were doing it, in turn, like the Marines. And these were like, the jocks and the dudes that were getting, with the girls. And because I was a virgin when I went to boot camp, and we can talk about that too. But yo, like, so yeah, and I was sold quick. And so, my recruiter told me I could check out my rifle anytime I wanted and go to the range to practice. And if you know the Marines, that's not true at all. I touched my rifle once a year because I was a pogue, right? But
What was your
so
MOS?
data communications, like you said, it was the ASVAB. I did good on the ASVAB, and then I did good on the language test, and I did good on like the electronics test. So I had this decision to make. Do I want to go to linguistics or did I want to go IT, right? And I'm from the Bay, which is, right now occupied Ohlone territory, otherwise known as Stanford, California.
Mm-hmm.
My pronouns are he, him also.
Okay.
For those folks, right? So boom, boot camp did all that, right? Meritoriously promoted twice, Marine of the Quarter, the company level, the battalion level, shit hot, right? Went from shit hot to shit bag overnight. I was NCO after only 18 months in the Marines. I was only 19 years old.
What year is this?
98, went in December 98, got
Okay.
out. Yep. And then went from shit hot to shit bag overnight, right? I'm on this fast track. Boom, over, right? It's an NJP is a whole different, like, sort of takes you out of the long-term career decision type thing, right?
It varies, right? Because they say you're not a Marine till you get NJP. Well, that used to be the culture.
Totally.
Yeah.
But, I wanted to be like a drill instructor, man. I was motivated. I would drill myself, right?
What you
Like
get NJP for?
DUI, right? Like alcoholism in the military, like that's something we can definitely talk about. How one of the toxic aspects of Marine Corps culture is this Tun Tavern birthplace that somehow grants us entitlement to get shit-faced.
Right? Yeah. I just got off of duty. I'm a drink. Change of command. I'm a drink.
And I was in Okinawa. We got a typhoon coming.
Drink.
Fired up, right? But anyways, like I was active duty also in 9/11, and I was in Okinawa, and barracks is going crazy, right? Troops are putting on their flags and stuff and high-fiving or whatever, right? We're going to war. It's the barracks, right? And for me, man, I gotta be honest with you, I kind of like step back and like took a breath, or maybe like I kind of detached a little bit from what was going on around me. And as I'm witnessing this, I looked at it as like a form of performance art.
Performance art.
And you know how you try to kind of, when you look at a piece of art, you try to sort of think about, how do I interpret this art? What is he trying to say here? What is the idea? And for me, if you consider that the World Trade Center is the pinnacle symbol of America's foreign policy that shits on the rest of the world, it made sense.
Why not take it out from a terrorist POV?
Right? Put myself in those shoes, for example, right? I know, and I didn't choose this sort of like experience to happen while it was happening. I'm being honest with you, right? Like, this is what I was thinking. And then, well, if we consider that the Pentagon, right, that got hit by a plane, the pinnacle symbol of America's foreign defense policy, right, that shits on the rest of the world. Like, it made sense to me as targets. Like, I understood like why, because we're all, like, why would this happen? People are saying why, these are terrorists, right? But if we look at it critically, the only difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter is perspective, right? Like, okay, now I'm supposed to go to this other side of the country and like sight in on this dude on the other end of the battlefield, right? I'm a data pogue, so I'm going to set up the email network that sends the email and all that kind of shit.
Like, yeah. I was postal, so.
You feel me, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm going to do that, and I'm going to like sight in on this guy and take his life, right? For what? Like, he didn't cut me off on the highway. He didn't like grab my girlfriend's ass. Like, he's not like stepping on my sneakers, like, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's no beef. And you know what? Like, this is his homeland, right? Like,
yeah.
So it's just, I knew for me, like that, and of course, the NJP, right? Like, I knew that this couldn't be a long-term decision for me. But also, to be completely honest with you, I was Microsoft certified on active duty. I was Cisco certified on active duty. And I was looking at them .com dollars too.
Ooh.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Don't let the green grass fool you. I was fertilizing that grass. I was watering that. I hired a gardener, right? All that, whatever.
This grass is crazy.
So yeah, that was it, man. That's kind of why I enlisted for the most part. Also, why we enlist. 50% of active duty troops are survivors of childhood sexual trauma, myself included.
Right? Really? I knew that as far as like female Marines. I don't know how true the statistic was, but they said a good 90% of female Marines that join because of sexual trauma. And I said, are you serious?
That's really interesting. I think we should maybe unpack that a little bit, right? And it could have an idea of, especially if us as men were abused by men, right? Mm-hmm. It's well, now I have to prove my masculinity, right? Now I have to
So you live up the whole rough and tough bad boy image of a Marine killer, all of that stuff. However, deep down inside, it's just a facade.
That, right?
Or it could be a facade. Yeah.
Well, to make up for, right? It's to make for up abuse. Well, let's look at it maybe this way: is the military recruiters don't spend most of their time up in the hills at those schools, right? They're down in the flats.
Yeah.
And so essentially, the prison industrial complex, right, and the military industrial complex, they intersect in the same low income communities.
Oh my God.
And so those of us by privilege, right, or by just luck, escape that school to prison pipeline. We're funneled into violent, state violence, right? Violent servitude as a way to get out of where we came from, or, really with tuition rates what they are, unemployment rates are what they are. we're clambering, right? We're trying to climb towards this myth of upward social mobility, and we're willing to put our lives on the line. We're willing to like kill, right? That's
Get
what
a
we do.
Hellcat, Camaro.
So yeah, man, I think we said a lot, but so well, I guess the point of that, to say all that, was this is like most of us, a lot, especially on the enlisted side, right, are already going into the military with histories of trauma because we're recruited out of poverty, right, where there's a lot of challenges, right? That's where law enforcement enforces their efforts, medical access to medical care, healthy food,
Parents, like,
and if Flint still doesn't have clean water, right? So it's like there's a lot of factors, so and so and then a lot of folks experience trauma in the military, whether it's combat or military sexual trauma, right? Or
yeah, especially being in a predominantly male institution.
Sure.
It's just one of those things that, how do you fix that? To stop, or your goal is to stop it. However, we want to be honest, you have to reduce the numbers first, then for it to be able to stop, if that makes sense, right? So how do you do that in a predominantly male organization? Because some people will call it a cult within itself, right? So you have the Marine Corps as a whole, and then you have those people in that cult that just like touching without, consent. And I don't think that's a military cult in itself. It's just a mindset thing within the man of saying, oh, you gonna give it to me, or I'm gonna take advantage of it until I get it. And I don't. That's nasty to me. Like, we gotta both consent.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Consent is super important. And so really, especially with that culture and heritage of alcoholism, right, that we have in the Marine Corps, I'm curious, is consent really possible under the influence of alcohol?
They say no. They say one is no. Like, that's the briefs, because I did 2008 to 2018. Yeah, 2008 to 2018. And like the briefs I was getting coming in were saying one drink is no.
Yeah. And so I'm also curious, like, I've heard that culture of binge drinking in the military, right? Like, I was 98 to 02, we were getting hammered. But and you just got out, you said 2018, right? So welcome home, right? And so has that culture shifted from your perspective, or is getting shit-faced, in the binge drinking part of the Marine Corps, is that still,
It started to change once. So when I first came in, it was still lit. Like, they were still, like, hazing was like there. However, it's like, don't let me see it, don't let me see the hazing. But it wound up changing probably my third year, right when I came back from Afghanistan. That's when it really wound up changing. So Hawaii did that, and then I went to Italy. However, I was on the Navy base. Yeah, postal, postal baby.
No. Oh.
So I went.
Yes,
I went to Italy. Like, reflecting on it now, I don't even know if I can really give a safe answer on that, due to the fact of you're in Italy, so it's wine, and then mind you, you can drink at 18, right? Command of discretion, and you could go out in town and drink at 18. So the big dogs, they like, well, I'd rather you drink on base versus go out in town and drink and, cause all these problems. So that was it. But it really, I saw a difference when I came to Albany. I was a sergeant at the time. And like, I grow, I was growing mentally as well, but I didn't see a lot of people in the smoke pits like that, right. Drinking. Right. I would drink in my room. Don't get me wrong. I would drink in my room and watch a movie, right, and keep it pushing. But I don't know. I would probably have to get. I would probably have to ask like one of my other friends, Ford. He's a gunny out in Japan, and then another gunny out in Lejeune to probably see what their incidents reporters are looking like. Who's on the blogger?
Right, right. Well, I hope it does change, man. And that's really what, you know, my long-term advocacy goal is active duty cannabis access.
So before we get into that, right?
Please.
I want to debunk something. Well, not debunk. I want to get a clear understanding of something. You brought up in the room one time, and I was like, I never knew this was a thing of veterans not feeling. Hold on. Veterans feeling less than because they didn't deploy.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know that was a thing until coming into one of your rooms. However, my only thing about that is if you signed up and you not expecting to deploy, that's when I look at you side eye. But if you got an MOS that just doesn't deploy, you didn't just have the opportunity, I can't hold that against you.
Totally.
Yeah. So that's my only thing. You could go deeper into it.
No, thank you for asking, man. I'm really glad you brought that up because it's a huge part of my experience where I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. I went to comm school before that in 29 Palms, and there was only one spot on the whiteboard where they put up all the possible duty stations. There was only one spot for Okinawa, and I said, "Yo, if anybody else wants it, we're gonna have to figure it out in the barracks, right? In the smoke pit, like you said." Right? Lucky, I did pretty good in the class. So, and these other folks chose like a Hawaii and a San Diego, so I was able to get to Okinawa. But and I stayed there the whole time, 3.5 years. And in that time, I deployed to Brunei, Bali, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, Hong Kong, Thailand, Australia, and Korea twice in those 4 years.
Dang.
Did the shellback thing, all that, right?
Oh, you did the ceremony?
All that, sure. Okay. Yeah. That's like the only thing I have framed is the shellback thing. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, man, I did all that. And you know what, though? The first place that every civilian would ask me about when I revealed that I was a veteran was, oh, really? Iraq or Afghanistan? Oh, yeah, Iraq or Afghanistan. And for me, like, none of those countries mattered, right? Because I had to, it's essentially like a warrior without a war, so to speak, right?
Oh.
And essentially, I allowed that lack of combat experience to misinform me of an unfulfilled military experience, that I didn't do enough. Thoughts of like, I was pretty good at comm, and maybe somebody, with not as much experience as me, had to go, like, take my place. They might have been hurt or might not have been as good as me. So, the mission, someone might have got hurt, right? And there's that kind of guilt. And really when Pat Tillman, when he was killed, he was the Arizona Cardinal football player that left the NFL to join the Army, and he was killed in Afghanistan. For me, like I said earlier, I had those .com kind of dreams, right? Pat Tillman's example, where I left the military to pursue economic and success, right? Financial success, material success. And Pat Tillman had all that. He's in the NFL, and he sacrificed that to serve, and he was killed. And I was like, oh shit, like it hit me, you know what I mean? And around that same time is when the veteran suicide study came out. And so, I just allowed that to kind of inform me to get involved towards, making some change. But
okay. Look, you did your time. You did your time gracefully. All them countries you've been to, I would love to go without a deployment, Like it doesn't make or break. You did your time, Now, if you avoided it, I kind of look at you side eye, like,
Essentially, like, that's what I did, avoid it by not re-enlisting, right?
As far as
and I'm telling you, like, this is like the negative mental health narrative that I'm having in my head. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's like rational, right? I'm just saying, like, this is where our minds tend to go when, you know, I can't introduce myself as a combat veteran, right? And, you know, and because we form our identities around these things, right? To kind
Yeah.
of, these are my civilian ribbons, right? Or these are how I have to, you know,
Yeah.
and what's particularly interesting to me is how we're forming our identities around our disabilities, right? Like as we're introducing ourselves, we're saying our percentage rate, and
Yeah.
it's interesting to me how we allow these sort of experiences to form our identities. But you know, really, the most helpful thing, because you know, not going to Iraq or Afghanistan and having that misperception that I didn't do enough, reflected in negative mental health ways such as, you know, overeating, right? Depression, napping, obesity. I got up to 285 pounds.
This
After,
is after you got out?
yes, sir. Not
Wow.
even, it didn't even take a lot of time really, but um, excessive pornography use, ripping out my toenails, right? Like it got dark and bad for years, most of my 20s. Um, and then you know, working with helping veterans kind of helped me along the healing. Cannabis helped me along the healing. Fitness, doing yoga and shit like that helped me along.
Hmm.
But it was a psychedelic experience that I had.
Ooh.
The venom of the Sonoran Desert Toad, 5-MeO DMT, which
Repeat that?
the venom of the Sonoran Desert Toad.
Okay.
Yeah, it's frog venom, and it's only from the south, you know, southwest part of America and the northeast part of Mexico, that Sonoran Desert. And you essentially, you know, hit it for 10 seconds, hold it for 10 seconds. And then as you exhale, you sort of just melt, right? Like you die. And I felt like, oh shit, life is over. And that's just fine because this is so like, it was just relaxing, right? Just that total release of stress and everything. And I was like, life is over. That's fine. And it's cool because this is about to be great. And I'm just being, you know, embraced in this warm white light that's just cozy and comfy and just warm and beautiful. And then in my peripheral vision, like a drop of ink in water, it looked like it wanted to go to a dark place. And so I made this decision. I was like, well, let's go dark then. And immediately it was just, and went from that warm white light to black and cold and scary and dark and sad. And it was just excruciating. And I'm writhing on these mattresses and tapestries in the middle of the Northern California forest. And to keep it real with you, I was like regretting that go dark decision. I was like, but look what I got myself into, right? Because it was like going into like the depths of my heart, like the worst. It was basically bringing out all my pain, right? All my trauma, all my shit. And then a little speck of light came through when I tapped my finger on the mattress. And then I would tap a little more light, a little more light, a little more light. And then boom, I was awake and I was connected to everything.
So it was just showing, like, bottom line, it was just showing you're in control of your own darkness and lightness, correct? Is that a good?
So essentially I died, right? And when I came back to life, I was connected to everything. The trees, the birds, the bugs, the people that were there. It's just this ultimate feeling of just like one, right? Like, and then I felt this love, a love that was precisely curated for my specific needs. And again, I'm out here in the forest, right? It was the love. I could feel snipers out there in the bush, right? Watching me with their scopes. I was like, hey guys, you can come out. It's safe to come out now, right? I felt the love of combat, door kicking, pipe hitting warriors from like forever. Like they were all there, like in the bush around me, right? With camo pants on and just, right? And I felt love from them. right? Like this love from them. Like they were all like, they had like this ambush set up, right? For me, right?
Yeah,
Just give me
they
this,
got your six.
give me this love, man. And like, it informed me as a non-combat, non-infantry veteran that I'm enough and that I'm worthy and I'm complete and I'm whole and I'm lovable just as I am. And so I could basically let down that backpack of shame that I didn't do enough, you know, that I was carrying for all those years. I could finally like release it. And then, and then it also kind of felt like, oh shit, like I'm that pogue. Like I'm the one that's supposed to help other pogues, you know what, feel like you're enough and you're worthy and you're lovable and you're complete just as you are.
Yeah.
And this is it, man. This is my life. This is all I want to do is like help our people heal, right? But also, yo, we talked about military sexual trauma, it came up before, and you talked about this, the psychosocial part of it. One is like, yeah, we live in a capitalist, imperialist, patriarchal society, right? Colonialist society, right? That harms women. Let's just be honest there, right? Harms women at the baseline. And then you have the ultra masculine Marine Corps, right? Military. And honestly, like war and rape have always gone together, right? Like peas and carrots. Genghis Khan, right? Good example.
So many people in this world. His DNA is in so many people.
It is, I think, more maybe, well, yeah. So I don't think you can separate the two, and essentially, right? I don't think that, I think that the veteran suicide problem, right, again, right, is something that we're not really going to solve until we learn to go upstream, right, and look at war and look at just violence and state violence, right? Because that's where this comes from, right? This dominance.
Yeah, the military, all it is organized street crime. Like, if we really want to be honest, like, it's just on a country to country level versus block to block.
Hello, right? Absolutely. And it's, you know, and that's what I keep bringing up, man, because why aren't we talking about peace enough? Why aren't we, you know,
we don't know what peace is, though. This is the longest this is the longest that we've technically not been in war, right? As a country.
Right.
From my understanding. Yeah, we don't know what peace is. You can tell by leadership, I'm not saying like the generals or, you know, these, you know, sergeant majors, some of them, but you know, yeah, they making up rules in the barracks. We doing uniform inspections 5 times a week. Like, for what? Well, always be ready. Be ready for what? You can't say anything. You know what you're doing? Fog of war. What am I preparing for? Exactly.
Yes. I mean, always ready for the forever war.
But we need intel for that war. I can't be ready for a war in Afghanistan if we're going to Russia next. That the climate is different. That messed us up. In what war was that? I don't even know. I don't even know.
Well, yo, and you're right. Like, we're overextended in the Middle East, right? We've been in Iraq, Afghanistan, longer than Vietnam. But there's no anti-war movement in America. There's no, right? Like, there's no protesting anti-war anymore, right? Like, it's a wrap. And really, I think it's because it is, there's no draft anymore. It is just mostly the poor kids going to do the fighting. The richer kids that are officers, essentially, right? If at all. So
what are like the true justifications for war?
That's the thing, man. Like, I think, you know, humans have always kind of, this is what I hear, right? Humans have always kind of had conflict and used violence to resolve conflict. And yes, things like capitalism, absolutely. I believe, exacerbate war, right? Like, and that's where a lot of the moral injury, I think, comes from as a U.S. service member. Is, you know, you sign up thinking you're going to be Luke Skywalker and save the world, but then when you get in, you realize that you're a stormtrooper defending the empire.
Yeah. That is true.
And that was from an Air Force trooper that's in my community that shared that, you know, quote. So
I like that.
Man, and it's because, right, like, we're not fighting Nazis anymore. We're not liberating Europe. We're not, right, like, pushing back the Japanese or whatever. We're dropping like $500,000 bombs on poor Black and brown people living in mud huts who will never see that amount of money in their lifetime, right? And a lot of this, like, precision technology isn't
drone attacks.
Shit ain't so precise, right? Collateral damage is ridiculous. But and also specifically, and I don't remember getting briefed about this, and I'd be interested to learn if you did. Do you hear or get any training on depleted uranium?
No, what is that?
Interesting, right? So in our bombs, you know, in our, you know, artillery, we used to use tungsten as in the tip because it's super dense, right? To penetrate. We changed to depleted uranium because it's cheaper. It's a byproduct of nuclear energy, and it's way more dense also, right? So it's a lot more effective. However, you drop a bomb with depleted uranium, it vaporizes. That depleted uranium doesn't go anywhere, not for hundreds of thousands of years. And it's in the water, it's in the soil, right? Like, it's
your bloodstream, gets in your body, onto your children.
And we don't get, like you said, I didn't get no brief on that. You didn't get no brief on that. There's been no, like, PPE, right, to protect ourselves from these interactions. And so, yeah, it's toxic, man. And that's the thing, man, the whole culture is toxic of violence, right? And masculine, and how we define masculinity. And it's, so what I'm really inviting us to consider is that just because that's how it's always been, doesn't mean that's how it always has to be, right? At one time, we thought the earth was flat. Some people still do, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
We never thought we'd get to the moon. And now here we are, right? Going to Mars, doing all this shit, right? So I'm saying, like, you know, technology is changing the way that we interact with each other. That's why we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
Psychedelics are changing the way that we look at ourselves and look at the world. And I think that it serves as like a disimagination, right? Like, just because we've always been violent means that, like, we're always going to be violent as humans. I don't think that necessarily it has to be true. So that's what I'm really just inviting people to think about, because honestly, like, I've been working in veteran suicide for 8 years, and have great results, right? Pulled some troops off the ledge, transformative growth in our community. But really, like, if I'm not going up that ladder or swimming up that stream to look at the cause, right, which is the military industrial complex, which is these endless wars for resources, then I'm really just one of these mental health opportunists.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Got you.
I care about this, right? And, like, my goal is to put myself out of a job, essentially, right? I don't want to do this work on this for the rest of my life. I will, but in order for that to happen, I can't just work on the symptom, which is veteran suicide, military sexual trauma, right? Like, I got to go up to the upstream of the
So
cause.
are you pro-military and anti-war? Is that safe to say? Or
I mean, like, I'm pro-warriors, right? Like, I understand, like, there's this sort of archetype, I guess, that men or women, there's been a lot of women warriors also.
Shout out to them.
For real. What I'm saying is, man, the more and more I think about it, and it's a great question that you asked, is the more and more I'm just anti-violence, right? because I have believed, experienced death, right? Where I'm not afraid of it. Like I'm ready in a lot of ways. I don't know if I could like be violent again. Like and it's complicated because if you bring it to me, I might just let you and just release and surrender, right? But if you try to bring it to my girl or my family or something, it's hard to turn that stuff off. You know what I mean? So I'm still kind of struggling with that, right? And like, how committed am I to nonviolence?
Jeez. But wouldn't you think that it's a helpful skill to have in a sense? In the act of self-defense and we could say self-preservation as well. Survival when in a situation like that.
Totally. And it's hard to say how I would, really react in the moment. But I do just know, man, that like, so I had this mushroom experience. I was up on this hill. I had this, friend with me, and we came down the hill, and there was these deer that were like really close to the path. And so we kind of just crouched down, and they like came up pretty close. One of them did. And, closest I ever been to like a wild animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was that fear in my heart, right? Because it's like, I've seen the things where they kind of, a deer might whip your ass, right? Or kill you. And then I just was like, yo, I just kind of like surrendered to it, essentially. Like, yo, if this is how the creator meant for me to go out was by this deer, like, let's go, bring, I'm ready. And there was just this beautiful, blissful sort of thing that, so I think there is the ultimate martial art, right? Is submission. Just surrender, right? Because you're just gonna bring me closer to God, essentially, right? You're just gonna bring me closer to, right, that next plane of existence that I believe we all came from and go back to.
Geez, okay. So let's get real big into your cannabis and psychedelic advocacy, and where do you see that going, and light up and go for it. It's a lot. And a crazy story of mine is I remember this one I knew I was good for podcasting because I don't care, right? But we was doing a urinalysis test, and my XO came by, and I had a serious question, and I asked him, I said, do you see marijuana being legalized for active duty members? And everybody was looking at me like, why would you say that? You're on the chopping block. He's going to get you. I'm like, no, it's a legit question. I see where the world is going. And we all know it ain't no fun until the feds have some, So it ain't no fun till the feds have some. So
how did he respond, that XO?
He said he sees it can happen. However, it's a testing thing. Like, how could you test of somebody being high at work? You could test it for alcohol, but how do you test that thing? He said,
yeah,
in his career, he wouldn't mind it, but it's just a whole testing thing on that. You don't, because Marines, they, especially depending on your MOS, you're dealing with millions of dollars of equipment and all that good stuff. So how do you test for that? But
he's right, because cannabis stays in your body for around 30 days. So
yeah, but even the highness, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, man. I think we're talking about plants. We're talking about plant, right? Like, let's get real, especially when alcohol is totally cool. Tell me how many of your double dogs were faded at 5:15 a.m. PT on Monday morning.
Oh yeah, including myself a couple of times.
I've been there with you, man. So yeah, and so we're talking about a plant, right? But for me, I was smoking herb in high school. We'd cut class, put in this album by MC Pooh. He had a song called "Fucking with Dank," and he would tell you all these spots in Oakland where you can go to pick up herbs. So we would put that in, and we just get it, and then of course quit for the Marines. Didn't take long to get back into it when I got out, because like I said, man, I was like Microsoft certified, Cisco certified, got discharged back here to Silicon Valley, right? The kind of perfect little setup. But yo, all my network was blue collar folks,
Ooh.
painters, plumbers, construction, right? Like I didn't have that network, but also I didn't really have the networking ability. I was terrified to introduce myself to strangers. I didn't have the name tapes on anymore. I didn't have the rank anymore that kind of proved who I was and where I was, lined up in society.
Yeah, the hierarchy.
Right. And so I never really networked, terrified. But I found like if I rolled a joint and I lit it in public, strangers would introduce themselves to me.
Good
It was-
marketing.
It's like social bait, man.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're having conversations, now you're creating relationships. So for me, it's been a great way to manage anxiety and and depression also on the mental health end. I also think it's a great performance enhancer. I like to consume right before the gym, so that we can even talk about that as a military perspective, right?
Yeah.
Man, like bronchodilator expands the air sacs in your lungs, reduces your pain receptivity, reduces inflammation, and helps with focus, right? These are all like athletic enhancements, essentially.
Yeah.
So, been super helpful for me. And then, in my practice, I've also given away hundreds of pounds of cannabis for free to veterans, and they've experienced tremendous benefits because it's also expensive, and most of our community is low income folks. So
Yeah. Wow. So I can't even start this cannabis conversation within the veteran community.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like my idea is to use this platform that we're creating as like an advocacy platform also, right? And so the mid-range goal is access for all veterans in every state, because they shouldn't have to leave, Iowa, Utah, Louisiana, right? They shouldn't have to leave their churches and their communities and their families and their networks to come to California or Colorado to often sleep in their cars, right? Just to get access to cannabis.
Yeah.
So it's
even that because even when they get that access, it's a limited amount they can get, correct?
Well, that's the thing, access, right? Especially when it's expensive too. So that's why collecting donations of it and giving it away for free is really, a big part of our platform.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So that's the mid-range goal, right? Like access for veterans in every state. But then
cut on a light. Keep on. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. The long-range goal is active duty access. For me, if I had access to herb as a substitute for alcohol, maybe I would have avoided the alcohol-related decisions, right? That got the NJPs and all that.
Yeah. Why do you think the feds are such a stickler about that? About passing it and all that stuff.
Totally. I think the pharmaceutical industry has a big impact on that. I think that the alcohol industry has a big impact on that, the lobbyists, right, and all that. But really, it's also the 13th Amendment.
Yeah.
It's where, the 13th Amendment, banned slavery, right? Unless convicted of a crime. And then we have like we talked about earlier, the prison industrial complex, right? That imprisons Black and brown people at a rate greater than anything in the world.
Crazy.
Right. And so I think that's it, right? Holding on to those, because really, where are we going to get all this free labor from? America's economy has always been based on free labor.
GDP.
Whether that was labor stolen from Africa, right? Whether what's happening now with the labor with, south of the border, right? Central and South America, Mexico.
The Asian community. I want to say the Japanese community, right?
Totally.
With opium with the railroads, if I'm not
No,
mistaken.
we did a lot of dirt to the Chinese
Oh,
community, right?
Chinese. Okay, sorry.
But also the Japanese, right? So you
Oh,
remember, you ever heard of Victory Gardens?
mm-mm.
So this was like World War II. There was kind of like food shortages. So the government was essentially asking for community gardens, right? Like you grow food, you grow stuff at your house, right? So that we could save for the war effort, sort of thing. These victory gardens, right? Grow a garden in your house. It's going to lead to victory in Europe and in Japan, right? But yo, I learned recently that was actually the root of that was racism in California, where we interned the Japanese immigrants, right, and citizens, right? We interned them in camps in California. And a lot of those folks were farmers, and you know what? They were better farmers than the white folks in that area, and their property values were going way higher than the white farmers in California at that time. So those white farmers lobbied to Sacramento, to the government, to have the Japanese farmers interned, right? And then we can take over their land and all that, right? And we weren't as good at farming that land. And so that's what led to the food shortages, which led to this propaganda campaign that they called Victory Gardens.
Wow. I ain't gonna front. White people could be fucked up sometimes. Jeez.
Yo, you're absolutely right. And and also like humans, right? Humans have been fucked up to humans, right?
Yeah.
For a long time. But you're right, like colonialism and so, you know, in the Marine Corps, right? That's what we kind of know about is we have this light green, dark green sort of. You ever heard of that? Right? And it's this kind of color blindness, right? Where exactly we're all the same.
Fuck no.
If you look at, you know, working parties, if you look at promotion rates, punitive punishment rates, the Marine Corps particularly is the worst in terms of
I was part of that statistic. Yeah, I also something I didn't do. Somebody owned up to it. Like, yeah, I happened to be around or whatnot, but was actually done, I didn't do. Like, I was like, look, I didn't do it. So old boy owned up to it. I still got in trouble.
Which is, you know, I'm really appreciate you sharing that, man, and I'm really sorry you had that experience. And it's a micro example of a macro problem, right? A macro injustice problem in America, particularly for Black and brown folks.
Yeah, and then once I went through that trial tribulation in my life, and then it just opened so many other aspects of like, because at that point I'm looking at E6 to get promoted to E6, and I was told everything's a numbers. I was like, no, it ain't. Like, I didn't know it was like, I knew it was a numbers game of how many we got to promote. However, I didn't know it was a numbers game of, well, we got 6 whites, we need to promote 3 Blacks, 2 Asians, and 1 Hispanic. When I looked at that, I said, are you serious? So I'm like, I'm honestly getting pitted against my own people at that point.
Wow.
Like, I'm honestly getting pitted at my own people. If we need to promote 3 Blacks, that means, okay, out of y'all 3 Blacks, out of y'all Blacks, who's the one that's going to get it, you know?
And that's where the pro and cons numbers are going to come in.
Exactly.
Right? Or maybe that's who we're going to choose to like be extra harsh with the punishment or that sort of thing. So it's, yeah, essentially that light green, dark green is a myth, right? And I think it's to help the white people feel more comfortable with their institutional racism.
Promotion boards. I remember I got a part. Like, I did my research on everything. I called the uniform board, and I was like, yeah, I want a part. Can I get one? The lady told me, yeah. So they was like, yeah, you know, set up your appointment for your promotion board photo. doing it, did it up. They's like, you need to cut that part out your head. I said, why? They's like, because it looks too eccentric. I'm like, it's part of the order. And then that's when I started to really realize that if I'm not bald headed, then if I look like a drill instructor, bald headed with a shaved face, you ain't getting promoted like that.
Well, it sounds to me, right? And I'm open to being wrong, and I have limited perspective, right? And it sounds to me like, you know, white folks have been policing the hair of black folks forever, right? It's the last way to grasp on a Jim Crow and, you know, subjugation, essentially, right? Like, and it's a, let's be real, right? What are we talking about here? You're telling me that a hair part is eccentric? This is really what we're talking about. And this is a meritorious board that I'm like working on here. I know all these, my land nav and my boots are polished and all this kind of shit. I spent a lot of time studying for those boards, man.
Yeah.
It's a machine. And it's, you know, it's basically, if we look back in history, right? Like, black folks couldn't join the military, and then, okay, we're gonna need you in the union, right? Because like we're getting our ass kicked and shit too. So, and then it was segregation, you know, segregated troops, barracks for whites only, and all that kind of shit, right? And then integration, and then there was all like the lynchings. You know, World War II troops, when World War II veteran troops would come back, they were at a greater risk of being lynched. They were lynched at a greater rate. You know, you fought for the country, right? You should have that pride to like walk down your hometown streets, but unfortunately not for a big part of it. In LA, we had what's called the Zoot Suit riots.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard about that, right? And this was blamed on, you know, Chicano folks, right? It's like messing with American troops. And it turned into these like 2-3 day riot in LA. But really it was the opposite, right? It was these racist, drunk, white sailors and Marines, you know, wrecking shop, which is what we do when we're out on liberty, right?
Yeah.
And particularly, you know, in those days, and, you know, we can look at now with not good intentions, right? Racist intentions.
Yeah.
You know, the Marine Corps Scout snipers, right? They still use that SS, you know, iconography that is from the Nazis.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Check that out, man. Marine Corps Scout snipers, and look at and they try to like, you can
rebrand it,
you know, all that, or talk about how it's older than that, you know, sort of thing. But some things we gotta let go of, y'all.
I know where you got it from. So speaking of like chaos, and you kind of brought it up, do you think that if we were to let active duty military personnel smoke marijuana, like suicide cases would be down, possibly rape cases or sexual assault, possibly, I ain't gonna say it will be, but do you think it will kind of decrease those numbers that are bad for us as a whole, and alcoholism?
You hit it exactly. I think offering safe alternatives to alcohol is going to result in better troop readiness. Absolutely. It's going to result in, you know, longer careers, whether that's from the pain and inflammation or the mental health benefits, or just avoiding the alcohol related incidents like I couldn't do. So yeah, but, you know, I also understand where the apprehension comes from the military, particularly because, yo, man, if I smoke a joint, I don't really want to hurt people. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if you look back at, you know, there's this clip of troops in the bush in Vietnam, and they're smoking herb out of a shotgun. The bowl is down there.
I've seen that, yeah, because that's when those rifles was actually made from Mattel.
Oh wow.
Yeah, the plastics. I forgot what you call that. When you
Garment.
make the rifle, yeah, it's made out from Mattel on the toy product. Yeah.
So I mean, and I say that because there's this film called Sir No Sir, which describes how the Vietnam War actually ended. And sure, a lot of it was the protesters back home, but it really stopped because active duty troops refused to go on patrol, right?
Mm-hmm.
Often this was, the black and brown troops that were being put disproportionately in the most dangerous situations, right? And that solidarity ended the Vietnam War essentially. And so I think, like, I understand why the military would be reluctant to implement cannabis, because shit, man, when you can kind of elevate your brain to that level, right, where they kind of, you feel more comfortable being your authentic self in your own body, and you have that self-love. I don't know, man. I don't think, like,
Like, fuck this military shit.
I mean, yeah, and it's really like, I love my brother to my left and my right type thing, right? And that's another part of the propaganda in the right, in the re-socialization that they do, right? To make me willing to hurt other people because I have this bond with these folks, right? This
Mm.
us versus them sort of thing. When really, like, I think hurting anyone, right? Violence in any capacity does harm to the self, right? Like, I cannot hurt you without suffering from that, and I
Mm.
don't think it's like, it's not really in my natural human inclination to hurt you. I think it's my natural human inclination is to love you. And that's why we have military training, to sort of get you to instinctually shift to that kill. Do they do this in boot camp for you, man? And like, we would sweep the floor with those little brushes, right?
Discuss brush.
Scuzz brush, yes, right. And we get all online and we're on our hands and knees, and the drill instructor would say sweep, and all of us would have to scream kill,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Kill, sweep, kill, 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 right? Like, that's, we even like say kill as like a Roger, right? As like
Yeah.
a aye sergeant, right? Like,
Yeah.
kill sergeant, like, it's that, it's intentional, right? Like, systemic, in the Marine Corps does it better than anyone, right? Is turning off, I think, that empathy for others, right? Or we're forced to limit our empathy of others to our fire team, to our squad, right? To our platoon, to our flag,
Yeah. Because
right?
these are the people that's gonna have your six when you're in a foxhole or
Yeah,
when you're on patrol.
right. And I understand, man. Like, we know them more than most, that strong bonds are formed through shared suffering.
You're trauma bonding at that point, right?
Brilliant, absolutely. I've never heard it, that term applied to that experience, and I love you for that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Trauma bonding. And that inspires us, or puts us in this mental position to cause and inflict trauma to the other.
Mm. So is it, and it lingers too. It lingers when you get out. The human mind is so crazy because I feel as though that type of training, whoever created that, right? I don't think they were that person. They're just clever enough to be like, you need to think this way. However, the long-term effects, no one can effectively turn it on and off. You can't go from killer to, oh, let me get my baby.
I appreciate that. And I will just kind of gently offer that I try to avoid can't when we're talking about
Okay.
our human ability, right? Like, overcome. I think that, yeah, it takes a whole lot of work. Absolutely. And I don't know if you're right. Like, that once a Marine, always a Marine. It may be true, However, like I would like to believe that with a lot of work and intention, we can eventually put down our sword.
Yeah, so what I mean by that is having that like being in the rodeo. The rodeo, being in the organization, it's either one or the other. And if you if you aren't able to be that, have that mentality, oh, failure to adapt. I'm gonna write you on paperwork. Failure to adapt.
Absolutely.
You don't want to shoot. You want to go to the gun range. Failure to adapt.
You have no choice but to submit, right?
Yeah.
You're plugged in. As soon as you get on those yellow footprints, you're plugged in. And so submission is the only real, option in the military. You just trust the system. And so you're either in or you're out or on your way out, right? You're with the shitbag crew like I was. Let me ask you, you did 10 years, right?
Yeah, 9 years, 11 months.
Right. Thank you. That's essentially halfway there.
Yeah.
Right. And so, that kind of just invites me to ask you, like, what made you not want to like do the other half, or specifically, like, was it that NJP that, you decided to pivot?
So no one really ever asked me that. Thank you. It was a lot of things. So I wanted to become a recruiter. So I volunteered to become a recruiter. They kinked my package back down and said, "You on the hit list? Put a package for all 3." I thought about it, then come find out they had a message that came down saying that we're looking for drill instructors. And talking to my career planner, aka career jammer at the time, you saying like, look, they looking for drill instructors bad. I said, that's not my style. I'm not, that's not it. So that was one reason. Another reason was off of racism as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then my last final nail in the coffin, to where whoever you believe in was like, look, this is the last final sign I'm gonna give you to pivot, was I tore my ACL playing flag football on base. I tore that sucker, and being on bed rest, trying to rest it up, I just had a conversation with myself. I said, I got to look at the long run. This is a long game. You have to understand that. And as I discussed before, the military is kind of getting boring, or kind of getting bored. And what I mean by that is leadership don't know what to do because we're not at war. So you out here doing inspections and all this other stuff that I wasn't really privy to coming in, because I'm like, okay, deployment, we making sure this is good. This is good. You made sure my Charlie's good every Tuesday. You just saw him. But yeah, I thought about it and I said, you know what? To sustain long term, it's not going to be able to happen, especially with my body, because we all know you don't want to. It's a stigma, right? That stigma of not going to medical, that stigma of trying to get back into the fight and not being on light duty, because you still got to show the PT, and PT gear on light duty, you just in the back. So you want to make sure you have that mindset, like, yo, I need to be back with the team. I need to be good. I need to do that. I was like, I'm not going to be able to sustain it, especially because I feel as though personally that the DOD or whoever runs the medical field of that, they don't have realistic time frames on recouping.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my thing. So I'm actually joining the Army. I'm going into the Army. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, for logistics. So
Nice, man. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that experience. And I'm glad that you listened to your body, right? And was listening to, your intuition, essentially, that said, hey, let me make this move. So good for you. And then, it's also like you did mention racism, right? And like, I imagine if that wasn't part of it, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
if shit, you might have stayed with the green machine, right? But Yeah, it's
I want to go
thank
where
you.
I'm celebrated, not tolerated. You know.
I just want to sit with that for a second. That's beautiful, particularly with in the
Out
love
of all
life.
aspects of life, you know, go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And once you really realize that the conversations are different, the opportunities are different.
That's beautiful. I
Yeah.
love it, man. Yeah. Thank you. It's Can I ask you also maybe like, I was saying my story of like what kind of influenced me to join kind of lack of applying myself, family tradition sort of stuff. What got you to, step on those yellow footprints?
Same thing. My great grandfather was in World War II or whatnot, and then my uncle joined the Navy, and then he would just tell me, of course, when you have family members, I always say it's levels to the stories they tell you, right? So of course I was always getting, because I was younger, so I didn't know. So I was getting, oh, I traveled to this place. I traveled to this place. I met, I think he met John Madden before. He met one of the first black master divers called Bashir. Um, just meeting all these people. And I was like, man, that's cool. That's a nice experience. I want to do the same thing, but I was never told about, the inside house politics. Um, so that was an influence. Another influence was I hated school. I didn't want to go to school. Forget the SATs. Like I'm out here. I want to do that. So I was really easy pickings for my recruiter. And then my last thing, you can't laugh, right? The last thing was I wanted to get my driver's license. And I told my recruiter, I was like, yeah, I'd join if I could get my driver's license. He's like, nah, don't worry about it. They'll give you your driver's license. You'll get your military driver's license. So I was like, oh, sign me up. I was like, I'm gonna get my driver's license because in Maryland, you had to go through driving school, then you had to do all these hours and all that stuff. He's like, yeah, you don't got to do all that. Just sign up. So I signed up, got stationed in Hawaii. I didn't know about the federal and state thing. So it's like, yeah, my staff sergeant at the time, he's like, you don't have your license? I was like, nah. He's like, oh, take the test and go out there and get your license. I was like, so it's the exact same thing. He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, my recruiter told me I'd get my license through the military. Like, technically you did, right? Technically it's one of those things of, if I feed you bread, you still ate.
Ooh, yeah, man. It's true. That's another thing we have in common is, the recruiter will tell you whatever, man. So it's interesting that you wanted to be a recruiter, that you wanted to, go down that route.
So the thing about that was, I like coming up as far as getting groomed in the military, I had a lot of stand-up staff NCOs. So he's like, yo, why tell a lie? Because it's gonna come back to haunt you 4 years later. Cause that stuff carries on. And I was like, you know what? If I can't make mission that month, I can't make mission. And they just gonna have to deal with it. So I'm all about telling the truth. Like, why lie? That's somebody else's life that you're transforming. At 18, 17, 18, we'll just go for the younger age, right? 17, 18, by the time they're what, 22, 23, 24-ish, they've evolved. 13 weeks you evolve.
Absolutely. And I think what's also important to mention is that the human brain isn't even fully developed until you're like 24 or 25 years old.
Yes.
Right? Your prefrontal cortex, I think, is like the last to develop. And so for me, it questions the validity of these contracts if they're made with folks without their full mental capacity.
You're just a body. You don't really count till like E5, E6.
That's why on your ID it says non-NCO, right?
Yeah.
And this is, it makes me wonder about all these, like, I don't know how that has influenced, the fallen, right? Like all the Medal of Honor citations, the Navy crosses, all that, right? We hear all these stories about these like privates and lance corporals like fighting off these waves, and I don't know. It's
Do you regret joining? Like the stuff that you know now, as far as like being peaceful, do
I'll put
you?
it like I'll
I
put
don't
it
know if
like
regret's the
this.
right word.
No, well, you know what? It was this year for the first time on September 11th, right, of 2020, that for the first time in my life, I felt glad that I didn't go to Iraq or Afghanistan, right?
Mm.
And that was a huge transformation, right? We're on the other side, because before it was, I felt bad because I didn't go. Then I got to, I'm enough whether I went or not. And now I'm at, I'm glad I didn't go,
More
because
for your mental.
really that, yes, right? I'm thankful, I'm blessed that I didn't have to harm anyone, but also, like, I'm glad I didn't have to put my family name to an unjust war.
Ooh.
My
Ooh.
my bloodline, right? To, kill poor black and brown people living in mud huts on the other side of the world.
Do you have kids?
No, sir.
If you were to have them, or when they do come in life, do will you talk them out of not joining,
I think that
or
what
would you
I'll
sway them into like a particular branch?
what I will do is, differently, is no toy guns, right? Not the laser tag or the Nerf or the water guns or all the things that I played with as a child, right? Not the GI Joes, not the Call of Duty, right? I want to avoid gamifying, violence, right? And guns are not toys. And I would train my kid on like a real gun, right? Just to be able to discern the difference and safety, particularly. Um, but yeah, and ultimately I just give them as much information that they could to make the best decision that they could, right?
Like it. I like that.
And really ask questions, right? Hey, why do you want to join the military? Hey, why, what is it you're looking for? And then maybe all for alternatives, right?
Because it's not that, because most people always give like that congratulations thing. Like, yeah, I'm gonna join the military. Oh, okay, that's what's up. Da-da-da. It's not are you sure? Have you considered this? What are
Mhm.
your other options?
Right. It's because as Americans, right, we have this culture of violence. The Star Spangled Banner, the bombs bursting in air, right? It's um, as Americans, we have honorific expressions towards veterans, right? In the military, we have the propaganda, flyovers at the Super Bowl, and the flags over the, you know, and also like the reunion porn, right? Where they have the troop in uniform surprising his family at the basketball game at the half court.
I like that reunion porn.
No, but it's all intentional, right? To create this psychological conditioning to admire violence, right? And to, aspire toward it.
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, it's that bait and switch method, huh? Switch and bait. Is it bait and switch or switch and bait?
Sure, right? Like it's maybe baiting you with this honor and glory and right through sacrifice and violence. And I guess the switch would be like they don't really tell about what that's going to do to your head and your heart.
Yeah. 'Cause
And then just real quick, like, and then as a culture, American culture, right, we're really good at sending young poor kids to war. We're not really good at welcoming them home and reintegrating them back into the village. Indigenous cultures, they have rituals and ceremonies to welcome their troops back into the village and to disperse that burden of, state violence among the tribe, right?
Mm.
But Americans, we don't really have that. It's
And part of your do you have an organization, or can I see, like, I was looking on your page, I'm like, he does a lot.
yeah, it's called Operation EVAC, educating veterans about cannabis. We do recurring 90-minute social support groups.
Mm.
We, set goals. We, have safe space for vulnerability check-in. We, respond to discussion prompts to kind of, form positive narratives about our experiences and about ourselves. And then we do a meditation, a 20 to 30-minute I rest yoga nidra meditation. It was developed at Walter Reed by a guy named Dr. Richard Miller.
Okay.
And we have this lady that's trained in it, Jane Leonard, that's a fantastic practitioner. So the first part of the class, we laugh a lot, sometimes cry. Second part of the class, we sometimes snore from the meditation, right? And if me as a facilitator, I can capture all of those emotions in a 90-minute session, it's like celebration, right? And then so meeting attendance also enables you to be eligible for free cannabis. And so, cannabis medicine is fantastic for our community, mostly of which are elders, veterans of color. A lot of folks are, along a spectrum of substance abuse recovery, housing insecurity recovery. We have indigenous folks. We had 3 trans folks in our meeting recently.
Oh, wow.
I was like so grateful for, that we've created this sort of safe space, right, for us to come together. And to keep it real with you, right, I'm open and transparent about this. Like, the free cannabis is the bait, right? Hey, what's up, man? You use cannabis medicine? You like smoke herb? Come through. I got a bag for you. And you know what? That bait is to really invite veterans to avoid the isolation, which is often where we go to when we've experienced trauma, is to isolate and to hibernate. So to avoid that isolation, to come in, create relationships, right? Curate a community where a lot of healing and restoration comes from. And then to like benefit our resiliency through the meditation and the mindfulness.
Mm.
And then we recently finished a yoga teacher training from the Veterans Yoga Project. So we're going to be implementing yoga into our practice soon too. And
that's in Cali, correct?
We're based out of Oakland. However, that's one of the benefits of Zoom. I love our in-person meetings pre-COVID. I love to shake hands and give hugs and rub shoulders and all that. And in looking at the silver lining, we've had troops check in from New York, Florida, Texas, Hawaii. And so it's incredible that, this has expanded our access, but also at the same time, to be honest, the digital divide, which, is affecting low income and rural communities throughout our country, also has affected our community. Pre-COVID, we had 180 members. Now we're growing, we're about like 25. So
we're just 25.
25 troops.
I was about to say like 2,500 because you said growing. Because I'm like, what? Jeez. What? Yeah. Shout your website out. Let's get this information out here, because that's one of the premise of the podcast, of talking to fellow veterans, talking about their business and getting it out there. Veterans need help. I feel as though no matter what you sacrifice within the veteran community, except for if you stepped on the yellow footprints, it was like, I can't take it today, and tried to dip out. If you did like 2 days, I'm like, this ain't for you. But as far as my veterans, look, there's no way that you sacrifice 4 years. That's a common contract, 4 years, and you down and out. There's other veterans out here that's making it happen. look at these resources, and this is one of the reasons why. I have Ryan up here. He has his own thing.
Mm.
So if
Thanks,
you
man.
need somebody to talk to, or just to be around that fellow veteran community, because we feel as though fellow veterans, we the only ones that understand each other, right? Reach out to him. He does, you may not get cannabis because you may be in New York. However, because we ain't no drug dealers, we ain't shipping stuff, across state lines. However, somebody to talk to on the digital aspect if you don't have nobody to talk to in your state.
Totally. Thank you so much, man, for that generosity. That's a hell of a plug. And also, members, totally welcome, but also leaders, right? I've achieved a huge amount of my healing through the support of others and through the service to others. In service to others, I'm myself am restored. So if there's leaders that want to get involved in your communities, wherever you're at, cannabis is legalizing all over the country. And so if you want to get involved, like we have this platform, we have a whole training pipeline. You'll be a certified veteran peer support specialist. There's some other, trainings involved. We can empower you for that. We can help you get, fundraise for that, right? And lead this in your state. And if there's not these legal laws that enable the gifting, like the free charitable, non-commercial access, we had to fight for that in California. And so we have a blueprint to help you fight for that in your state. So leaders, right? Like, let me help you facilitate groups in your states.
That's deep. You heard it.
And I
You
need help.
heard it.
Like, to be honest with you, man, I need help. I got one of my closest comrades, Alex de la Campa. He's a retired, Navy SEAL, essentially. He was also injured, with the TBI and broke his back pretty much in SEAL training. He's my closest comrade, and he's went through this whole training pipeline that we've, co-created together. And so, we got all our SLPs, and we've demonstrated scalability. We have a plan. We have a proven platform. It's working. And we need help, honestly. Like, let's get it.
Let's motherfucking get it. I gotta attend one of your next thing. Yeah, I'm very interested. Even though I'm about to go back and I can't indulge into the the cannabis portion, but just helping veterans in general.
Really. And I'm really glad that we have this relationship, and I'm super glad that Clubhouse could facilitate it. And that we're just getting warmed up. You know what I'm saying?
You heard it.
Once you're in, that's how I'm just gonna keep it real with you. That's how I radically revolutionize you and help you get these other troops to put down their weapons, right? And come home. Bring every troop home now.
Yeah.
Every troop home now. Right?
We gonna connect. You got a website? Shout your website out.
OpEvac, that's Oscar Papa Echo Victor Alpha Charlie.org. OpEvac.org. Operation EVAC, educating veterans about cannabis, educating veterans about consciousness, educating veterans about civil disobedience, educating veterans about civics, educating veterans about compassion.
We like that.
Come through, right? You're welcome. You're invited.
So y'all heard it. Hope y'all enjoyed the conversation. It's not hope y'all enjoyed. I know you enjoyed this conversation. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to Ryan. It's very, very dope. And everything is aligning in life. You just got to trust the process. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Unpredictable Thoughts Podcast. It's your boy Troubles. Peace.
Peace. Love. Blessings.